I wouldn't even attribute it to what people would probably assume, which is just like hearing the bad stories about what happened to the young people who came through our program. And don't get me wrong, I mean, horrible, horrific things, but you kind of just get used to hearing that. Where it really came out were the other effects of trauma. So obviously, when a young person whose brain is not fully developed in any form or fashion has experienced these traumatic events, it manifests a lot in their behaviors. Those behaviors, whether physical or verbal, whatever, very much take a toll. The secondhand trauma that just comes along with walking through that path with somebody and just being there as a listening ear, not necessarily for their stories, but just the rest of what they have to say, because they are so much more than just that story. And I mean, you're genuinely getting the feeling of trauma that they experienced. Like they're just passing that on to you without realizing it. And you sit with that. And what do? Is we typically don't do anything but sit with it.
Welcome to It's Both, the podcast where we explore the messy, beautiful contradictions of being human. I'm your host, Nikki P, and each week I sit down with real people navigating life's complexities, those moments when life isn't just one thing, it's so many. And this week I sit down with my friend Corey as he talks about the bothness around wanting to stay in a job and also knowing you have to leave. Corey spent so many years working in the nonprofit sector, especially with homeless youth and the LGBTQ+ community. Our conversation is all about the tension that so many of us know well, that passion for meaningful work, but also the burnout that can come with it. Corey shares what it's like to carry the weight of other people's trauma, how he navigated a toxic work environment, and what it took for him to finally advocate for his own well-being. We also talk about the power of finding a workplace that supports you, and even how humor can play a role in surviving the hard stuff. So let's jump in. Well, welcome, Corey.
Hello.
So good to have you here.
I'm very glad to be here.
So before we jump in, I would love it if you could just tell everybody a little bit about who you are. Who's Corey?
Nobody.
Oh.
No, I'm kidding. I don't even know where to start, though. I mean, I feel like I have so many different layers.
Okay, what's the first layer?
I mean, I guess we could start about where we met, which is
Okay.
through work. You needed a data person, and I am a data person. I blessed your life immensely.
Absolutely.
Obviously still am, even though I'm no longer there. And yeah.
Yeah. So what's the next layer?
I don't know. I mean, I'm still in all the data stuff. I do enjoy it though, which is great. I am an uncle, which I love being an uncle. I have a 3.5-year-old niece who's amazing, and I have a nephew on the way. He's going to be born close to my birthday, actually, in just a couple months.
Really?
Yes.
That's fun.
So I'm very excited. I have a dog who I'm obsessed with. He's, running around in the background right now. And yeah, I think that's most of me, honestly. Why do we not like talking about ourselves, though? Suddenly now, I'm the interviewer.
I know. If you had to describe as if you were watching a show and you were a character in a show, how would you describe the Corey?
I don't know. I like to have fun. I like to joke about things. Like, I can be a very serious person, but I also don't like when things get too serious. Good topic idea for podcast. This podcast, not a different podcast. There you go.
That is a good one. Okay.
It's a juxtaposition. There you go.
I like it.
But yeah, so I would literally describe a character of myself as just the dumb idiot of the show who is saying ridiculous things, even about myself is the thing. So maybe the comic relief of the show.
That's a better way, because you're not, like, you are so smart.
Yeah, I'm not dumb at all. I'm not trying to self-deprecate. I'm not stupid. I'm smart.
That's a great second podcast idea that I've actually thought about is, do you ever feel, we're going to go off on a rabbit trail already, but like, do you ever feel very intelligent and very stupid at the same time?
Oh my gosh, all the time.
Isn't that so hard to explain?
Yeah. I think I always default to just saying imposter syndrome, even if it might not be the best like description of it.
That's good.
Yeah, I was talking with somebody at work about that the other day. I was like, this job made me feel like I was dumb, even though I know I'm not.
Yes. Yeah, for sure. I mean, same. Even outside of work, sometimes I'm like, man, I feel good I feel good about my intelligence, and then I say something or think something and I'm like, "Wow."
Yep.
Questioning that immediately. I will say also to your personality though, like we always talk about shows and
Mhm.
movies. So I
I
feel
do love
like,
a good pop culture moment.
yeah, and books, right? You love to read.
It, so I love to read, but I haven't been reading a lot lately is the problem. But yes, I do love a good book.
Yeah. There you
And
go.
wine, beer, the stuff that's
Cold
bad for me.
cold brew,
Love a good cold brew. Crema, obviously.
obviously, shout out. Crema, you want to
Yeah,
come sponsor an episode?
I was about to say, do you have sponsors yet? How do we get them to sponsor?
Crema, come on. I know. There's a lot on my list. I'm like, I need to get them connected because they are
I'm gonna
amazing.
as long as you get free coffee out of it. They
That's
don't
what I
even need to
need.
pay you anything else.
No, pay me in coffee. That will save me money, actually. So, talk to me about your both. What is one of the things for you that creates this like bothness or this tension? And tell us a little bit about that.
Yeah, so I think, a lot of it I doesn't super center around myself right now, but
Hmm.
more of like my past self and things that I went through at a time. And that is, I was feeling so passionate about work that I was doing with homeless young people, in the mental health field, but also being so incredibly burnt out and maybe traumatized by the work. The I knew I needed to leave, but I didn't want to leave. It was such a weird position to be in
Yeah.
because of all of the lingering effects that just like carried over into my personal life. And it was no longer just work at that point.
Yeah. So, talk a bit about what made you want to stay so badly. What were the things in that space that made you want to be there? And how long were you there?
Yeah, so I was at this particular place for about 8 years. It was the first place I ever worked out of college. Like it's where my career started. And so going through college, it did take me a while to figure out what I quote unquote wanted to do with my life. As I feel like it does many people, if not
Hmm.
everybody.
Yeah.
Um, and when I finally landed on majoring in psychology, then I was like, what do I do with this degree? And I was like, you know what? I think I want to be a therapist. Um,
I didn't know this, Corey.
oh my God, I thought I'd actually told you this.
No.
Oh my gosh, Nicole.
Okay,
Okay.
sorry. We'll get to that in a minute. Keep going. Keep going.
Yeah, so many years ago when I was still actually in high school, funny story. I would always have movie nights at my house with some of my friends, and some of them were dating each other, blah blah blah. There was always some tension. We're high schoolers, drama. Somehow, I always ended up being a therapist to everybody in high school, like quite literally, like sit down therapy session, like let's talk about it. So I don't know why, even after all that, it took me so long to decide I wanted to be a therapist. Um, Spoiler alert, not a therapist. But so yeah, I was going through all that in college, and that's where I landed. And obviously, knew I needed a job afterward. I was working in accounting while I was in college, hated it, and knew I had to get out.
Yeah, I
Yeah,
can't see you as an accountant. Sorry.
I it was awful. I mean, nothing about it I enjoyed. I always swore I would never work with numbers after that.
And now you're in
Yeah.
data.
Yeah. But
Love it.
there's
Okay.
not look, all the math involved though, it's done for me because of Excel.
True.
So
True.
I'm not doing the math. Yeah, so I was looking for a job. At some point I had stumbled across something related to the agency I worked for. And then I was like, you know what? I'm going to go volunteer at this place, specifically around for this group that worked with like LGBTQ plus high schoolers. And I was like, this is amazing. Like they do all the stuff that I think I want to work with. And then they posted a PRN position. So I was like, why don't I just apply for this job instead of volunteering so I can get paid to do something like this?
Yeah.
And I got the job, and that was the start. It was my junior year of college.
Wow. Yeah, I
And
didn't realize that you started there in college, that was like your first career.
I was PRN for about 6 months, and then my senior year of college, I started full time. Yeah, so I started as just like entry level there, worked up to being program manager before I left. Um, I loved, loved, loved a lot of the people I worked with. I loved the young people that we worked with. They were all amazing. Obviously ups and downs, but still all amazing.
Hmm. Talk about, for those who aren't as familiar, and you don't have to get into like super detail, but
Mhm,
just briefly, what does that look like working with youth that are homeless and LGBTQ plus population? Like, how do all those things kind of intersect? How did that look for you in that job?
mhm. Yeah, so the agency I worked for had a big focus around just working in general with LGBTQ plus you. So it was kind of embedded in all of their programs for that aspect. But for the program I worked for, it was a residential counseling program. So we had young people actually living there for a few weeks at a time. So we operated 24/7. We always had staff there. So it was very stressful at times, especially when I was PRN. Like stuff happened at the last minute, like regarding shifts and working. So that was crazy. And then, you feel like you can never have a day off, even when you get salaried and have time off, just because of so many different things going on.
Did you feel almost, I could see this being a double-edged sword, right? Like you love working with young people and you feel connected to them and you want to
Mhm.
help and support them. And also, because you feel all those things, did you also feel like you were responsible for them? And like,
Absolutely.
if you took a day off, you were, I don't know, letting them down or.
Yeah, it always felt really. So I've always said since leaving, like I'm not a person who wants my own children.
Mhm.
It's not in the cards for me, but I have had over 800 children in my life.
Mm.
And those are the kids that I worked with for those 8 years because I've described it before as I was there for the tough moments, the good moments, having to redirect them and let natural consequences happen as this part of life. Made meals for them. It's essentially like a parent figure almost. So it felt, yes, like I was letting them down when I wasn't there. And it also felt weird giving that off to somebody else. Like, oh,
Mm.
these are my kids, and now you have to take care of them for me because I don't want to be there right now.
I mean, I can completely relate.
I was going to say, I'm sure as someone who has kids, yeah,
Yeah. Yeah. And that's interesting because it's so maybe it's not so much like you're letting them down, but it really is more, is it more that, okay, what does it say about me? Because this is how I feel as a parent, that I want space from you. Like sometimes that feels
right,
wrong, even though I'm like, I need it. Like I love you so much. And also I need to be away from you.
right, yeah. It's Yeah, a weird juxtaposition to like live in, I guess, because then you kind of like question yourself and you're like, wait, why do I feel this way? These
Hmm.
aren't actually my kids. But then you're like, no, that like I am gonna fight for that kid.
Hmm. Yeah. Wow. And 800. So,
And that was on the low side because of COVID, because we had to close for so long.
so would you say at any given time, how many youth were you working with?
On average, about 8 to 9. We had the capacity for 12. They stayed for 2 weeks at a time. Yeah, and even like those weird feelings of like giving things up were there, like as I got promoted and wasn't in that space as much.
Mm,
Um, so then it's like a weird, like you kind of have that same attachment because you're there part of the time, but then you have to step into a different role the other part of the time. Yeah, and I don't even know if I'd ever thought about it that way until now, which is kind of funny.
well, and it's interesting too. So I wonder in those moments, so you're moving through, doing this with the youth and then moving into supervisory roles.
Mhm.
How did you notice that you, as a manager or supervisor, leader, w- how are you giving the advice to others to deal with that? Because I imagine they were struggling with that same thing.
I think the unfortunate reality, which is also telling on myself, is that it was very much kind of an unspoken thing.
Mm,
And I don't think I ever really mastered being able to walk through those scenarios with people I supervised.
hmm. Yeah. But I think that's normal though, right? Because you were still in it.
Right, exactly. And I
It
think
wasn't like you
so.
were removed from it, right? And like had time to process and then come back and verbalize it.
Mhm,
Like you were still in it.
yeah. And I think that is, that was a big factor in kind of it's both feeling of knowing I need to leave and not wanting to, and that I was still in both of those roles. And It takes a very big toll when you can't have that separation when you know you need to,
Mm-hmm.
especially as a leader. And then also just kind of the constant back and forth that comes with like switching schedules every day. Like every single day was different. I never had set hours. Some days I was working until midnight and then going back in at 8. So
Oof.
like it was the weird things like that.
And is that mostly just because the turnover and the instability because it's such a hard field and people would call out, so then you had to step in?
This was a budgetary reason.
Oh,
um,
oh,
because they did not want to pay to fully replace me on the residential side. So I was
stop.
in both management and residential side for less money.
That is like, okay, I feel like for people listening who aren't in the nonprofit space, that
Mhm.
is one of my biggest pet peeves in nonprofit world. And
100%.
some nonprofits are a lot worse than others, but there is this like expectation that you can do two, three,
Hmm.
however many jobs at once, just because you might not have enough tasks to quote fill 40 hours, which is not true, but
Right.
on paper, what they say.
Yeah, that was, I don't want to say a fight because it wasn't a fight, but it was a fight that I regularly had with leadership at this agency, um, because I was advocating for myself as
Hmm.
best as I could, and it was kind of never taken serious. So like I'm telling people like I'm not sleeping. I slept for 2 hours last night, and now you want me to come in here with 12 you and be in a residential space.
Yeah.
And that doesn't even get into the own trauma that the residents are bringing into the space that we're
Hmm.
overhearing and dealing with secondhand trauma with. Um, so yeah, it had a very big impact on my life outside of work. I became very, very depressed, which was something that I hadn't experienced since I was a lot younger.
Hmm.
And I mean, it led to me having to see a psychiatrist and get back on antidepressants and ultimately leave the organization, even though I really didn't want to leave the work at the time.
So I mean, and I think you just described right all the reasons why you wanted to leave. You've, talked about why you
Mhm.
want to stay, why you wanted to leave. If those things had been adjusted, if you had been given some consistency, if the budget constraints weren't as they were, would you have wanted to stay? Would you have stayed?
I think I would have stayed, but I also know then some a little bit then and mostly now I know that that would have been so bad for me
Mm.
to stay. Um, I think especially towards the end, I was mostly there for just the people I was working with, and then I left and actually found other good people.
Who are those good
I
people? I'm just kidding.
I mean, you wouldn't know them, just some weird randos. No, but I truly, genuinely like feel very lucky for where I landed after that.
Hmm.
Um, Obviously, not just here to hype you up because you hired me or
Hmm.
anything.
Yeah.
But genuinely, like you are one of those people, you and Rod both, who are genuinely good leaders and know how to lead with empathy and lean into people's strengths, which is exactly what I needed at the time. Which obviously you didn't know. And I didn't know what I needed, but by God, it sure was.
Well, and I think we were so lucky to have you for so many reasons. And, I'm wondering too, because you were talking about this earlier, and I know what you mean, but for people who might not, like, talk a little bit about when you say secondary trauma, or you might have said vicarious trauma, I'm not sure. But can you talk about what that looked like for you? Like, what does that actually mean, and how did that show up for you? Because I think that is one of the things that honestly people that aren't in this field have no clue how to understand, oftentimes, or even people in the field that are a little bit removed from it or desensitized to it still don't realize like how big those effects are.
Right. And one thing I also think is kind of funny is I wouldn't even attribute it to what people would probably assume, which is just like hearing the bad stories about what happened to the young people who came through our program.
Yeah.
And don't get me wrong, I mean, horrible, horrific things.
Yeah.
But you kind of just get used to hearing that. where it really came out were the other effects of
Hmm.
trauma. So obviously, when a young person whose brain is not fully developed in any form or fashion has experienced these traumatic events, it manifests a lot in their behaviors, less so in, just telling their story to somebody. Those behaviors, whether physical or verbal, whatever, very much take a toll. The secondhand trauma that just comes along with walking through that path with somebody and just being there as a listening ear, not necessarily for their stories, but just the rest of what they have to say because they are so much more than just that story.
Mm-hmm.
And I don't even know like the best way to describe it. I mean, you're genuinely getting the feeling of trauma that they
Mm.
experienced. Like they're
Yeah.
just
Yeah.
passing that on to you without realizing it. And
Yeah.
then you sit with that. And what do is we typically don't do anything but sit with it
Mm-hmm.
because I feel like a lot of places don't focus enough on the effects that that can have on their staff who are in these positions working with people who've experienced trauma. One story that I'm not like to tell, but that I do tell in regard to that sometimes is I think maybe right before the pandemic started or like right towards the beginning. I used to smoke cigarettes, but I was reading this book. I think it was called like How to Care for Yourself While Caring for Others. And they literally use the example of dealing with the secondhand trauma that comes from working in a helping profession and smoking cigarettes as a coping mechanism to that. And
Wow.
the way they described it in this book was exactly what I was doing every day. They were
Mm.
like, if you are looking forward to that cigarette and getting in your car and smoking it right after work and then smoking it on your way home, you're like, and then it just built onto that. And I was like, oh my God,
Mm.
I, I look forward to that every night when I leave work.
Yeah.
And then I have my cigarette on the way home. I was like, oh shit. It's like, I think this book just got me.
Yeah.
And that day I never smoked another cigarette afterward.
Are you serious?
Swear to God.
That's very impressive.
I'd smoked for about 5 or 6 years.
Whoa. Wow.
I take that back. There was one night I got super drunk with a friend and had one cigarette, but
Yeah, I don't think
that
that
happens to
counts.
the best of us.
Yeah. That's a really, I think, unique situation. Like to have read that book and then that be the exact situation you're dealing with. And then you had the
Yeah.
I don't know, determination to just say, no, I'm not going to do it. I think that's amazing. But I was also thinking about when you talk about dealing with trauma, but it's not hearing the stories. And I'm so glad you
Mhm.
said that because oftentimes I even forget to describe it like that. But I'm thinking back to when I was doing so before, similarly, not the same exact story, but I also have prior to being in this role for the last 8 years. I'm a licensed therapist. I was doing therapy for 8 years before that, but the last couple of years of that, when I moved to Tennessee, my therapy license didn't transfer, so I had to go back and get some hours. And so, the only place I could really get hired was a nonprofit here that did crisis counseling for kids and youth. And similarly, there was no prioritization of the staff's self like needs and their self care
Mhm.
um and so I was doing crisis calls with anybody 18 and younger who was suicidal, homicidal, having psychosis. And I think in a very similar way, you get used to the trauma, the feeling, the hard, the big feelings. But what was more difficult day in and day out was usually the behavior of somebody who was super combative,
Mhm.
just verbally. I don't mean physically, just verbally coming at you. And I know in my head, I'm like, this is trauma. This is like a trauma response. They are getting
Mhm.
defensive. They are blah, blah, blah. Like, I know these things. And yet my body is like in that tense, defensive,
Yeah.
I need to like protect myself mode while also
Mhm.
trying to help this person, this child,
Yeah.
de-escalate. But then you're almost in like, I know some people who are just listening can't see, but like your shoulders are raised, you're tense, you're like dealing with whatever the behavior is that is caused by trauma, and you never like let go. Your body never lets go.
Yeah. I was just thinking while you were saying that, like I think it's like the unpredictability of that because you know you're going to go into work and hear an awful story.
Hmm.
Like that's a given. You
Yeah.
don't know what behavior you're going to get as a result from that horrible story.
Yes. And then because of that, you can't ever, like, I even described it to my therapist before. I was like, I can't ever go, like, I can't like take that deep breath because you're just, everything is holding it in to protect,
Hmm.
not
Yeah.
only protect yourself, but protect them, like, protect everyone, right? Like, and yeah, it's a really, really, really hard thing to deal with. And I think why, I mean, I know why, right? Research has shown like why people don't stay in these fields for very long.
Hmm.
And then the ones that do, maybe you have this like unicorn that can stay for a long time and still be empathetic and understanding and protect themselves and care for themselves. But often like the people that stay become so hard and cold and like,
Yeah.
and I get, it's like I get it, but also that's not a way to live.
No. Yeah. I myself did not personally experience obviously that end of it,
Mhm.
but did have somebody I worked with, a leader at that same agency who had been in that crisis program for honestly about as long as I had been alive at that point.
Wow.
Like she literally started a month before I was born.
Whoa.
And started as just a therapist and was a VP, and did not take care of herself. And as the youth would say today, had a little bit of a crash out, which also, then played into my own burnout because I didn't have anybody there for support.
Yeah, and then you have, I mean, leadership. It's so hard at any organization if leadership is not on board and proactive about like really intentionally setting things up in a way that keeps people safe and protected and all of
Hmm.
that. Like, it's not going to happen. It's just
Yeah.
not. The system is not set up for that.
Yeah. And unfortunately, there is just, and from my experience, nothing you can say to help leaders understand the way you see things and experience things in positions like that because you just can't understand it without being in that position. And typically, they're never going to go down into that position. Yeah, I think it just takes really being into it to have the best understanding, whether you're actively in it or not, like it was your past experience, whatever that may be. Um, yeah, I mean, I have countless horrific stories from that job that had no support afterward and they just couldn't understand. They were like, oh, well, that's what you signed up for. But then I have countless horrific, unfortunately, experiences that I never got, support from higher up leadership who should have. And it was more of a, well, this is what you signed up for kind of response when things would happen.
Which I have such a hard time with, like, understanding that perspective because, I mean, I'm like, to get to a leadership role, you had to do the job, usually.
Hmm.
And it's like, how quickly do you forget what you experienced?
Yeah.
Or you are so callous towards it that you're like, if you had to deal with it in a really hard way, everyone else should? I don't know.
Hmm. The latter. I definitely had heard similar things to that before.
Yeah.
That's how it's always been.
Hmm. It's interesting. I feel like there's a lot of things in life that I've seen that, whether it be like, I'll just use my example with my kids, like older parents, and not even like my parents or my in-laws, but like other sets of individuals who have had kids and who are older,
Hmm.
who like when you start to say how you're going to take care of yourself as a parent, well, they're like, well, we didn't have that when I was growing up. And I'm like, that sucks. I'm so sorry. Like,
Right.
we
It,
do.
it's like, and that's actually the problem with you, by the way.
In case you didn't know. But yeah, like at work too. And it just at organizations, it's so, especially in, I feel like helping professions in social work, in therapy, whatever it is, I think there is just this like, you also have this layer, which we haven't even talked about yet, where I can't imagine how much you're getting paid during this whole time. Like, maybe you surprise me and you're getting paid a decent amount. You don't have to say numbers, but like, I can't imagine knowing the nonprofit world that anyone is often getting paid what they should to be doing such, especially those jobs. When I think of like my crisis counseling or you working with like homeless youth, I'm like, these people should be paid double what they are paid because I will just speak for myself. When I started that job, I had a private practice. Let me just for context in Texas. Now
Mhm.
I was still an intern-ish. You're like an intern for many years after you get your licensure. But I was an intern, but I was making like 125 an hour. Like that was my hourly rate. And I have a lot of student loans I had to pay off.
As
um,
we all do. Yep.
but then I came here, my license didn't transfer. I got this crisis job. The the salary was $40,000.
I can't wait to get into my side.
40,000 for literally answering, I kid you not, 100 calls a day was the average,
Hmm.
80% of which were suicidal kids, homicidal kids, or those that were psychotic. And I got paid $40,000 a year, did not get bathroom breaks. We had to take our headsets into the bathroom because who's going to cover your crisis calls?
Right.
Nobody. You had three people covering the entire state of Tennessee. So you had to go to the bathroom with a headset, pause, midstream,
Hmm.
answer the call, get their information, and call back. And then lunch break was 30 minutes. But if you got a call right before your lunch break, what are you going to do? You have to take your call.
Yeah.
And a crisis call is not going to be done in 5 minutes. If you're like me and dinner time creates so much anxiety and stress, and you have very little time, especially if you have kids, from the time you get home until bedtime, let me suggest Hungry Root. Hungry Root has been a game changer for our family. Every week I go in and I pick out our meals for the following week. I get to select 4 servings, which is huge. A lot of delivery services don't allow for multiple servings like that, but it's enough to feed our family. They are really affordable. They're significantly cheaper than what you would get with some of the other subscriptions out there that tend to be very pricey and fancier, I would say, than Hungry Root. But it also offers a lot of healthy options. And so you can pick different dietary restrictions. Like I usually always select anti-inflammatory for the family, which is like a lot of fish, a lot of veggies, a lot of chicken. But you can also select vegan, vegetarian, high protein, gluten-free, all these different variations that you can choose from. That's affordable, it's healthy, and almost every single meal is less than 30 minutes to make. And oftentimes if it's more than 30 minutes, it's just the bake time that takes a little bit longer. The prep time on almost all of these meals is very minimal, that even somebody like me who has self-proclaimed that I do not like to cook because it creates anxiety and stress in me, I can even make these meals. It's been easy on my husband, who's the one that cooks, because I prepare ahead of time like what the recipes are going to be. I pick them on Hungry Root and I choose things that are easy for his preference that I know him and the kids and myself are going to like. And it's made our dinner time routine so much easier in a way that none of the other subscriptions have. And it's yet still affordable as if we were going to the grocery store and getting our groceries. So if you want to try it out, I highly recommend it, regardless of if it's just you and a partner, or you and kids. It works for any size family, any size household. And if you're interested, you can click the link below and get $50 off your first box.
I have both a very funny story for you regarding answering a crisis line, just to give us a little comedic relief.
Yes,
And then
please.
also, I would love for you to guess how much money I made when I started full time my senior year in college,
Okay, what year was this? Hang on.
2015.
Oh, it's going to be bad.
Mhm.
30,000?
And I was salaried, so you can.
Oh, salary 30,000. Less? Oh, stop it, Corey. 26.
$26,000.
Full time
Hmm.
working with homeless youth.
Exempt from overtime.
Of course.
Yeah, so
What?
I moved up 3 levels in their hierarchy. Would you love to guess how much I made when I left?
Okay, because that was when we hired you. So that would have been, what year was that? 2021?
22.
22? I mean, 45?
47.
Okay. That's
Yeah,
awful for moving 3 tiers.
running the program. Yeah, it
Corey.
was insane.
This is, and honestly, like, I am glad you shared because I don't think people understand.
No, people absolutely do not.
Like, that is, and for those of you listening, whether you're in Nashville or not, that is under the livable wage for this area.
That's under the livable wage for most of the country, I think, at this
Yeah.
point.
Yeah. Gosh.
Okay, so now the comedic relief of it all.
Yes.
So this agency also had a 24-hour crisis line, which
Mm-hmm.
we, always had to answer all kinds of different callers,
Mm-hmm.
the works. Um, so we always had at least two staff there. One night, the person I was working with had taken the residents out on an outing, and I was there by myself, which typically great time. Kids are gone, get to hang out. You just have to answer the phone if somebody calls.
Mm-hmm.
Well, I needed to step out to use the restroom, very, very badly.
Mm-hmm.
So I text the person I was working with, uh, because we were just texting in general, and I was like, "Oh my god, I just had to ask the front desk to put the phones like on night mode, which means they don't come back to us, so that I could go poop."
Yeah.
Turns out it wasn't just the person I was working with. I sent it in a group chat to the entire team, including
No.
our director and VP.
No, Corey.
The first response that came through was my direct supervisor, who he said, I'm assuming you didn't mean to send that in a group chat. And I was like, what are you talking about?
God, that is like, if you didn't have to poop already, you were definitely gonna have to shit after that.
Yeah.
Oh
Hmm.
my God, and how did you probably worded it in like, I just can imagine what I would be saying if I was texting a friend versus what I would say. Oh no.
It was not good. It was not good.
God. Did everybody handle it well, like in stride? Did they joke around about it or was it bad?
It was definitely, we joked around about it for sure. The director definitely brought it up on my goodbye party when I did leave.
That's okay, that's a good callback. I like
Yeah,
that.
because she did remember, because I was still relatively new when this happened. I think I'd been full time for maybe like 6 to 9 months at most, which means I had barely been there in general for like a little over a year. So we hadn't
That
had
is
many
such a good one.
interactions at that point.
Yeah, yeah. Wow.
But
I don't
so
know that
she
I
remembered.
have yeah, I was gonna say I don't know that I know I've done some really embarrassing things. I don't think I've done something that drastically like that clearly
Oh yeah.
embarrassing, but that's a good one.
Yeah, it was rough. You're welcome
Well,
for the comedic relief.
yeah, I oh man, that's so good. So, would you say when you were in the midst of all of that,
Mhm.
did you know or did you realize that you were in the both, right? Like or the tension of all of that, or was that something that you realized later after processing a lot of what you were going through?
A little bit of both. Ironically, I definitely started realizing that towards the very end of my time there, and then just kind of through processing and reflection. And after I was gone, was able to pinpoint like, oh, this was the beginning of kind of the end, essentially,
Mhm.
which was like a 4-year process in itself. But
Really?
or I guess about three.
So talk to me a little bit about that. How was that such a long process and why? Like what was kind of all wrapped up in that?
So there were a couple of situations back to back in about a 6 month span with residents, specifically suicide attempts. So three back to back in 6 months. After a lot of reflection and realizing kind of the lack of support that was there from the people it was needed from, that's what I would refer to as the beginning of the end. So that was like summer 2019 when that kind of first started. And then I left at the end of 2022. So it was, a little over 3 years. Right around the end of 2021 is really when it started to hit like, oh, okay. Like I have to leave. Like
Mhm.
as much as I don't want to, like I kind of need to get out of here. And that's when I started like applying for jobs.
Yeah, that's what I was gonna ask was like when you started that 3-year process, were you just kind of like, yeah, I'm just gonna kind of like apply here and there and see what happens, or were you just kind of it was just in your brain, you were thinking about it, and you didn't kind of get to that point for another year?
Yeah, it was definitely probably a year of like, oof, things are kind of getting rough. Like maybe I should consider doing something else. And then right around the pandemic, it was just like fully fast forwarded. And then that was, a whole beast within itself because it was like, I can't abandon everything in the middle of a pandemic. But it very much fast forwarded my feelings of maybe I should start like looking and exploring. But yeah, 2020 towards the end was when I started looking. I started applying for a few here and there in 2021. And then 2022, I was like full steam ahead, like telling HR at this agency, like, if I get an offer tomorrow, I'm leaving.
Really?
They knew how unhappy I was. I was vocal about it when I was having those moments of advocating for myself for like a different schedule. They kept telling me no, obviously. And so my supervisor at the time, who was actually very supportive and to this day is one of my best friends in the world, was also advocating for me and would tell them like, he's gonna end up leaving, right? Like planting that seed, and then eventually they started asking me straight up, like, if we do this, are you gonna leave? And the last
Wow.
time I was asked that was probably about 3 months before I did leave. I had had multiple interviews up to that point with different organizations trying to leave, and I
Mm-hmm.
didn't even let her finish the sentence. I mean, I knew what she was asking me as
Mm-hmm.
she was telling me that my request was being denied again. And I said, no, I won't be staying. And then I put in my notice in November of 2022.
Yeah, okay. It's just so hard for me to understand why organizations can't or won't take care of staff like that. I mean, it's just, especially like you're advocating for yourself. A lot of people can't or don't.
Right. And
And
it was such a weird feeling of being told how valued I am and how much my work is appreciated right before being told, but also, we're not going to put you on the schedule you want.
even though you've been
Also,
here
yeah,
8 years.
yeah. Also, you're still going to wear both of these hats and have one foot in each of these things.
So, through that experience, do you think it helped or hurt your growth? I guess I would say. I don't know if that question makes sense.
Is it a cop out to again say both?
It's not actually.
Because really, like, I mean, it probably did not help in some ways, but it definitely helped in other ways. Um, I very much credit my experiences there and with poor leadership to shaping how I am as a leader today.
Mm.
My favorite party trick, especially when I was interviewing with you, was to tell people that I had 28 direct reports.
Oh, I remember,
Um,
yeah.
like, I don't even know how else to describe it. Like, it honed so many skills because of not wanting to be like the people who I was
Mhm.
under, essentially.
Mhm. Yeah.
So I do think it helped, unfortunately.
No, and I mean that makes a lot of sense because I think similarly I probably have talked about this way too much at work, but one of the reasons I was so passionate about trying to create an environment on our team and in the big network of what I was doing was because I was like, I want to help the helpers because I've been the helper and nobody helps the helper. Like nobody takes care of those people who are on the front lines every day dealing with the trauma, dealing with the hard things. Like those should be the people that get the really fun conferences and days off and like really high salaries and
Yeah,
those should be the people we're celebrating and yet they're not. They're paid the least. There's the least flexibility. There's the least time off. There's the least time to process. There's like all of these things. And a lot of that is because similarly, I was in an environment and I was only in my job 2.5 years before I came here because I was, again, 100 calls a day, kids wanting to kill themselves, or somebody thinking that somebody wanted to kill themselves and having to navigate that. I mean, and I was working, 9 hours a day, sometimes overnight. You'd have to work holidays. I mean,
hmm
all these things. I would be going to bed at night just crying. I mean, just because and there was no verbal processing of it. I don't think I had a therapist at the time, which was really bad, but you know,
that's what they don't tell you. Like, you need a therapist when you work in these jobs.
oh my God, just to like a weekly therapist to
hmm
process the trauma that was then dumped on you. And I didn't have one at the time. Like I do now, but I didn't then. And I didn't know how to deal with it. I didn't know how to process it. I would just cry at night. I would just
Yep.
cry and then go to sleep.
I used to wake up every day so anxious,
Mhm.
like from just a lack of sleep and also not knowing what was coming my way. Like heart racing, terrified. to go in and see what is waiting for me.
Yeah. It's hard. And I think similarly, I wasn't asking you that, so you'd say both, but I do think
I'm just enlightened, so I know it's both.
I was going to say the more you start thinking about there not being a this or a that, it is hard. Almost every question now, I'm like, both. I mean, truly, both.
Yeah.
But I think for those like who haven't been through it, I think it's important to talk about this as much as possible because I know that people don't get it. I know people don't understand.
Mhm.
And there are so many layers to your story and why this is just one example, but I know so many other people are in a similar space to you where maybe they're not even at an organization where they're doing social work or in a helping profession, yet some similar things that they're experiencing where you're like, I want to stay. And
Mhm.
also I can't stay.
Right.
I do want to stay and I don't. Like it's both. It really is.
Hmm. I genuinely, not to like suck up to the host or anything, but like that's at this, I truly, that's how I try to live my life is
Hmm.
just looking at everything from every direction. Not in like an anxious or paranoid sense,
Sure.
but just genuinely because you can't form, in my opinion, good opinions or perspectives about anything without looking at both sides. Like nothing is ever black and white. It can't be. And I think that experience helped me understand that to be at the point where I am, where I have amazing work boundaries.
Yeah. Yeah. Which is so great.
And we
So
love it.
how I mean, as we like get towards the end of our conversation, you're in a space now where you like your job, you're getting paid
Hmm.
much
Great
more
money.
what
Hmm.
you need to be paid as you
Hmm.
should. You are working with data, but it's in Excel. But you're also supervising people, right? So
Hmm.
tell me about how coming from that job for 8 years and working with me and our team for how many? Four, two,
Two, yeah,
two.
like
You
almost
sure?
exactly two, I think.
Yeah.
Like
Working
almost
with
to the
us.
day.
Oh, that is wild.
It was December to December. I know that much for sure.
Oh, okay. So then working with us for 2 years, and then now in the role you're at, like you are supervising people. So
Mhm.
talk to me about that little journey and then what it's like now for you at work and as a supervisor.
Yeah, I mean, like I said earlier, I genuinely feel lucky for where I landed after leaving that first agency. Um, because not only did it give me what I needed to kind of heal in a sense, but also like gave me a renewed sense of, oh, there are actually leaders out there who are good leaders and like lead with empathy and respect the people who they supervise. And fully will admit that, when it came down to us not being able to continue the work that we were doing, um, for anybody listening, no, Nicole didn't fire me. Um,
Never, never.
I was again terrified, like, oh my God, what am I going to do if I end up somewhere where I don't have a rod in Nicole again?
Oh.
But I got somehow lucky for a second time and have ended up in a position. Let me actually rephrase that. I lucky for a third time, I believe, because I had a great boss when I started my current job who unfortunately left a few months in. And once again, we have found another great boss who all have very similar leadership styles. And I'm very fortunate for that. I was a little nervous to get into supervising again.
Hmm.
Um, but truly don't know what I have done in the past to have gotten as lucky as I have because I have a great little team. There's four of us on our little data team. They are all amazing. They all do such good work. They genuinely care about it and are passionate about it. And they make supervising easy, like
That's
point blank,
awesome.
period. Like,
Yeah,
I just have gotten lucky to have such amazing people around me.
I love that. And I'm so glad that it's taken a long time to get there, but
Yeah,
I'm glad that you got there and that you
me
get to
too.
kind of come to the other side and take that deep breath and go, okay.
Yeah. It's been wonderful. because genuinely, at the end of my time at that other agency, I was not sure I was going to make it
Hmm.
out of
Yeah.
there.
Yeah.
It was rough. So, yeah, I just love going into now this second team that I have of people who are passionate about this work and enjoy being with each other.
I
It
love
doesn't feel
that.
like a chore, which is great.
I mean, I think we are winning if we can get in a job where it doesn't feel like such a chore. And we have
Absolutely.
good relationships with people. Like that's a win.
Absolutely. And people from my past have come into this job now as well, which is so funny. One of the people I supervise, I worked with at this past agency.
That is so
Uh,
funny.
yeah, so we sort of knew each other. We worked in different programs, but we were there at the same time. So it was like, holy crap, we both ended up here.
Yeah, nonprofit world, especially here in Nashville, is very small. It's kind of a I wish there was a better word, but it's a bit incestuous. We've all worked
Yes.
with everybody at all the different places and then circled back and
Mhm. And then some of them, for some reason, cannot separate personal lives from that little nonprofit network.
a lot of them. What would you say to anybody who might be in a space where they, even if it's not to the degree that you were experiencing, they're in a job, they're in a workplace where they want to be there, but they also want to leave? Like, what would you say to them?
Oof, you got to put yourself first. Point blank, period. Nothing else to say. Like, and I cannot believe this. What just came to my mind? I mean, in the words of the famous RuPaul, like, if you
Yes.
can't love yourself, how in the hell are you going to love somebody else? Like, you cannot do anything in a helping profession or in general if you're
Mm,
not taking care of yourself. Like, you can't pour from an empty cup, as they say.
yeah. I mean, yeah, I don't know what else to say. You said it.
Yeah.
That's true.
And we talked about how smart and amazing I was. So
I know. I
there
know.
we go.
See? And you were like, "Who is Corey?" Well, this is Corey.
I told you I have layers. I just don't like
So
talking about the layers.
so many layers. I think this is really going to help other people and connect to other people because I think it's such a universal experience, whether you're in a helping profession or not, but especially if you're in a helping profession or a nonprofit where you are in this constant space of giving to someone else and also like 90% of the time not getting paid nearly what you should get paid or
Reach.
getting space to take care of yourself. So
Big emphasis on not getting the space to take care of yourself.
yeah, yeah. Well, as we wrap up, I would love to know if you could tell me something about you that is ridiculous or relatable. And if you need some examples, I can give an example. But yeah, something that you do that is completely ridiculous, maybe a little crazy, but also maybe relatable.
Wow. You know, we talked about this earlier. I had some things on my mind. And again, poof, they're all gone. I'm also like looking around my room next to me, like,
Okay,
what is
what
gonna spark like something weird I do?
either look around your room or think about your daily rituals, or what I always tell people now, you don't have this because we're like recording right now, but ask your like, think of somebody you've dated, somebody that is in your family or close friend that's like, Corey, what? What are you doing?
That's a terrifying thought, first of all.
Which piece? The dating or the friend or the family?
My
Which
God,
one?
family, obviously.
Oh, okay, okay.
I'm sure they would have the longest list known to man. Okay, something ridiculous I do that I couldn't even tell you how long I've done this because I do have a little like OCD paranoid side to me. This is going to be kind of the opposite of the example you told me earlier. It does relate to a shower. Every day when I turn my shower off, and like, you know,
Mm-hmm.
when you turn it off, like the little bit of excess water comes out of the bottom drain if you have a
Yeah.
bathtub,
Yep.
I have to run my foot under that really hot water. I don't
What?
know why. As soon as I turn it off, the water comes out. I put my foot out right up under it, and then I get my towel and dry off. At
That
this
is
point,
such a good one.
it's become I have to do this, or like my life's gonna fall
Okay,
apart.
okay. Couple questions. Is
Mhm.
it, do you swap feet each time or do you get a little bit
No,
of each foot? Is it just the
it's
right foot?
only my left foot.
Okay.
Hmm.
How long have you been doing this?
Probably like a decade, maybe.
Whoa. Seriously?
So when I was growing up, I had like just a standing shower, so just like the top shower
Mm-hmm.
head.
Mm-hmm.
But when I moved into my first apartment, and every apartment since then, I've had like a bathtub shower. So
Yeah.
it definitely started somewhere around my first apartment, which was about 10 years ago.
Wow. And just the
And
first,
back
do you
to
remember the first time, like why you did it the first time?
Oh, no, I was fully not kidding. Like fully had like some OCD thoughts related to it when I was younger.
Oh, okay. And then it just
But
stuck.
now I don't, and now it's just like kind of a habit. Like, ooh, I'm just still gonna put my foot under water.
And do you do it the same way every time? Like just like the side, the top, or, is it the
I
exact
mean,
same?
I will say I'm typically always like facing the same way. So
Mm-hmm.
then I just like stick my foot out. That's why it's my left foot always, because it's just the way I'm standing and where
Gotcha.
the spout is.
I'd
And so
be
I
so
just stick it under.
interested if you move and get a new house and for some reason it's like on the
Like if
other
I don't have a
side.
bathtub.
Yeah,
Oh,
or
okay,
what
so
if,
I've switched before.
okay.
It's not always been the left because previously I was the other direction in my last apartment.
And you would just do
So it
that
was,
whatever
so it
foot is on
was,
the,
yeah, it was my right foot.
this is hilarious. This is a great one.
So if I like move somewhere and back to a standing shower, God forbid, what am I gonna do?
Oh man. Okay. I love it. I
You're
don't do it,
welcome.
but this is great.
Yeah, I mean that's the whole point, right?
Yeah.
It
I
can
mean, my
also be ridiculous.
mine was I think the one I said earlier, but I wasn't recording, is I just don't like it creeps me out to stand like my feet touching the bottom of the shower. There's no logic behind it. I still do it. I don't wear shower shoes,
Yeah.
but it isn't like I don't mind tile. Tile isn't the same, but it's that weird like slimy white tub. You know what I'm talking? Just
Hmm.
that like feeling of the like slimy white tub. It's like,
Yeah.
ugh, and I don't like
Oh,
it, and I want to get
I
out.
just, I just like felt that in my spine when you said
Hmm.
slimy white tub for some reason.
See, you know what I mean.
I do know the feeling you mean.
Yeah,
Absolutely.
yeah.
Yeah.
Ugh, well, thank you for just sharing your comedic relief, but also being very vulnerable and sharing your experience because I do think it is really impactful and it's going to connect to a lot of people.
Yeah. Thank you so much for having me. It was wonderful to catch up with you here.
I just want to say thank you so much to each of you who listened to today's episode and spend your time with me and with others as we try to navigate the bothness of life. If this show is meaningful to you and resonates with you, it would mean so much to me if you would take a moment to follow the show on Apple, Spotify, or wherever you get your podcasts. You can do that by hitting the little plus sign on the main show page or hitting follow or subscribe. If you could also leave a rating or review and share it with somebody who might need it, it would mean the world to me. This really is the most impactful thing that you can do for the podcast. And that's how this community grows, through real people, real stories, and honest conversations passed from one person to another. So thank you again for listening, and remember, it's okay to feel all the things because so many times in life, it isn't either or, it's both.